Hello everyone, I am Stephen Drew from the Architectural Social, and I am here with Dolunay from Involved magazine. And currently you're in a hotel somewhere. It looks really nice. I'm stuck here in London. I'm stranded. I just cancelled my Christmas train tickets home.
Oh no.
My mum's not happy because all the presents are, she understands because of the R rating and stuff. But where are you, first of all? Where are you in the world?
Well, I'm in Cyprus at the moment. Just came back home for the holidays. But even though the hotel has a lovely sea view, which I haven't seen in ages and I missed, I've been locked up here, literally. I can't leave the room. But I'm going out tonight, hopefully, after my test results come out. So freedom.
Going out, wow, that feels like a distant memory at the moment.
Well, going out not in the British sense, going out of the room.
Absolutely.
Not out, as you call it.
Well, this is it. Yeah, not the Mickey Flanagan. But so I guess since you're in the hotel and you've got the lovely view, it gives you a lot of time to focus on something that you've set up. And for anyone that's not familiar with it, you set up Involved magazine, which I really enjoyed being an article there, which was really good fun. It was a little bit of a privilege.
Thank you so much for the interview. That was lovely. I think a lot of our readers found it useful and informative.
Do you know what, right? I've never thought I would be in a magazine, and for it to be a magazine set up by architectural students, to me, it means a lot because I'm technically still a part two, and I think that there was no magazine when I was a part two or a part one, and it would have been nice to have it. It would have been nice to have felt involved. Oh, there you go. That was that was natural.
Are we going to count how many times we make involved puns?
Oh, I don't know.
A lot of people love making it, me included.
It's fun, isn't it? But for anyone that hasn't heard of or read that been on the website, hasn't seen the magazine, do you want to give a little bit of a rundown about what it's about?
So we are called Involved Magazine, but we like to call ourselves a platform. That is because we're a platform for young people, young designers, architectural assistants, students to get their voice heard on. So we kind of provide this space where people from different backgrounds, different thoughts, they can write to us and they can be published on our website. And then we also have a hard copy annual issue, which we publish once a year on a theme. And they kind of have different styles. The articles online is little bit more sort of current and a little shorter, bite size, and then the our annual issue is a little bit more designed with the paperweights being thought about for months and stuff, as we like to, but also delving into sort of deeper into the themes that we do. And it's all through open call. So, we don't know what's going to be in the next issue until we receive all the submissions, which keeps it quite exciting, and we keep the theme quite broad. So that's kind of who we are for now. But the reason why I also like to call it a platform is because, we do more than just publishing, but we also do workshops to help architecture students gain confidence in writing and talking about the issues that they feel passionate about. And, we kind of joined talks, and we would like to also expand on that. But, the world has its own plans, and we don't know what the New Year's having for us.
Yeah, well, it's definitely interesting. And I tell you what, since setting up the Architectural Social, it's been great to kind of meet different people. And so I met Sana from Scale. Totally. I've met Architectural Experiment, and it was quite a pleasant surprise because we had messaged on LinkedIn, and you're like, I'm with Involved. And I was like, okay, what's Involved about? And then when I found it, I was like, this again is so cool. There's all these like fragments of stuff out there. And what I quite like is that the one blessing through, as you say, this new world is that it's kind of given of course, I'd love to, travel back to Wales on the train and be safe. And I'm sure you wouldn't like to be quarantining in a hotel, but there's these kind of weird and wonderful things that come out of it. And I imagine as well, you've probably picked up a lot of new readers during this year. I imagine as well, like you said, some of the articles that have come from this year have been born out of this crisis as well. And I mean, we got to speak to, and it was fun to do the article. And, actually talking about how we did it as well is, I'm used to before this year, it'd be old school. We'd be meeting. We'd meet in somewhere in person in my office, or you go to a Pratt, but everything's on Zoom right now, isn't it? And it was great to be interviewed on Zoom. And in one way, it makes it a bit more accessible. It was actually incredibly easy for us to do the interview. And I'm just wondering now, you say that a lot of people can collaborate. Are you looking for more students to get involved as well? And can people write articles, and can people suggest interview ideas like we had?
Yes, definitely. I mean, so when we set up, we were mainly students, but actually now we've kind of evolved into being young people led, but the contributions can be from anyone of any age, any background. We had submissions from all around the world, which was quite unexpected when we set up. We were kind of a group of students from Cardiff University, so we started quite local, and now we have submissions from Australia to Canada to France, and the reason, like you said, it's very important, actually, especially this year, it showed, to be connected, to feel supported, to feel like you're not alone going through things. And this was the inspiration behind it. I had, when I first went in this industry, which was in my first year of masters in Cardiff, you do sort of integrated industry and working in practice and doing your studies. And I had some tough experiences of fitting in and kind of navigating my way through it. And to be frank, a lot of frustrations. And one of the great things that year was that we had this module called Reflective Practice, which was us writing about kind of reflecting on that year, on that month. Every month we would write sort of like a block within the our year group, and then everyone would read it. And what that did is, because mine most of the time ended up as complaining about some of the frustrations I was living through, rather than necessarily talking about planning applications, a lot of people in my year felt quite confident all of a sudden in themselves, and they were like, actually what I'm going through is wrong, and it's not because of me. I'm not going through this alone. It's actually a systemic thing, which is important. And it was important for me to feel like other people could relate as well, rather than thinking that the problem was my experience alone. And that involved is basically that idea, but scaled up.
It's quite fleshed out already, isn't it? It's to me, there's so much value in there. You had Stephen Lawrence, you've got a few other people as well. So it's interesting, as you said. I quite liked your analogy there of, at first having a whinge about stuff, because I'm the same as that. I think it's the British way, isn't it? Have a little complaining and stuff. But what I like is actually to make it somewhat productive. And I think that it's really important, especially now, that kind of that community aspect of it. And what I love is that involved. You mentioned the idea came from you and a few fellow students in Cardiff. Shout out to Cardiff, fellow Welsh. I didn't get into Cardiff, actually. Do you know what? I didn't have good enough grades. But you had to have all A's, and I had AAB. And then I got it remarked and I got AAA, but it was too late. So, do you know what? I know. But it's a really good university. I absolutely love the city as well. And I love the idea that it was a collaborative effort that you all set up involved. Gosh, you're right. I almost wanted to say the pun then. It got involved together and set up involved. But no, it's such a cool thing. And, I quite liked it as well, just to bring it back to my literal experience. So, being interviewed, it was fun. It was fun. Do you have any plans? Do you see where it goes, or is part of the magic of Involved, like you said, because you mentioned it was systemic and it came from a certain need, but a bit like the Architecture Social, it kind of evolves over time because we change as people, we move on. I mean, how have you seen it change over the last few months, and how have you found Involved as a platform? Or do you have a little idea where it's going, or are you open-minded?
Yeah, I mean, we all have what we think we're going, like targets, and then along the way, things that you didn't plan for happen, and they're also welcome. And one of the, like I said, things that we didn't expect to happen was going global. We've had orders all from Las Vegas to New Zealand to anywhere, and that kind of shows that it's not even just in the UK that we're not alone in our experiences as architectural assistants. And to go into more sort of specifics, so when we started, we were kind of team of 40. Because I set up a meeting and
holy moly,
I put up posters. Huh? It was just me and another friend that was like, "Oh, I'll help you." So we printed posters. We put it on the walls, saying, "There's this idea. If you're interested, come along." And I booked this tiny room. And my friends were like, "What if people don't show up?" I was like, "I don't know. Well, maybe they will. Maybe they won't." Got some biscuits, put them on the table, and there was 40, 50 people in there, and it also goes to show how diversely skilled people in architecture are, because there were people that then became our web designers. So like all our website is coded by a wonderful Gina, shout out to her, who's also an architecture student. Our design of the magazine and everything is done again through architecture students. So there was this diverse set of skills. But so when we first started, we also had writers that we did workshops with, and we were publishing our own articles that we discussed. But through time, it kind of, like I said, became more of a platform where now people reach to us. So we had, during the pandemic, people that really wanted to write about the inequalities created within education because of this pandemic, that made everyone's experiences different. And RIBA kind of failed to recognize that things are different. The line that they were taking was, "Oh, nothing's changed. Maybe you can't make models, but everything else is equal." And everything else, of course, isn't equal, because everyone's resources back home isn't the same. The support of the studio is not there. Some people are away from their families. Some people had to deal with illnesses or their family members being ill. So it was amazing to be there for people that wanted to get things out there. And that is the biggest change throughout time. And so what I see Involved going is being the voice of those who are not heard. We were there when the Black Lives Matter movement was there, and we said, write to us, because we alone maybe can't reflect the experiences that you're going through, but what we can do is we can amplify it. And that's what, that's how I see it. I see us as being the amplifier.
I think it makes a lot of sense. And I quite like that the voice or Involved, it changes over time. It's very interesting because you talk about Black Lives. There's so much like keystones that are key corner points in the last year or two, which is a lot of fuel for the fire. And it is quite interesting. You mentioned there RIBA's stance, and I kind of, my views and perceptions of RIBA, especially when I was a student, have completely changed. On one hand, I respected RIBA, but I remember at one point in particular feeling like that they weren't necessarily supportive to me when I was a student. So sorry, RIBA, if you're listening, that's just how I felt at the time. I didn't feel particularly involved back then. Oh, sorry, magazine name again. I didn't feel involved. Oh no,
that's why we set up Involved.
Yeah,
that's why we called it Involved.
Yeah, and I will say though, I do think that they're making an effort. The problem is with, I think, RIBA and other companies is that the thing is, they've been set up for a long period of time and they're big organizations. And to make changes in these organizations, it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of time. It's a bit like the analogy of, I think it's like, trying to get the Titanic to move. Sometimes it might hit like the ice because it's taken so slow, but, it's kind of like stuff like involved, and hopefully what I enjoy about the Architecture Social of the fact is we can change and alter and we can move things around what we feel is important and react to people who are, who are reading, who have coming up with ideas. And I think that, I do believe it's been a bit of a culture shock for RIBA at the moment, because hopefully Simon Alford, who's joining, will shake things up as well. I quite like Simon because he leads AHMM. That's a commercial architectural practice. It's a serious architectural practice. And hopefully that his industry experience will trickle down. But what do you think about then stuff like that RIBA are doing now? What about like RIBA? Because they've got one or two things
Future
in Instagram.
Architects they have.
Yeah,
now.
What's your opinion on Future Architects? Has it been useful at all?
I think it's positive in the sense that one of the criticisms that we had is, especially due to the long time it takes to become an architect, you have a lot of young people like yourself, like myself, that are not architects, and that kind of feel like they're not represented in RIBA or in the mainstream magazines, and these people also have input to say, and they might have different issues than what is being written and talked about. And so, representation, as we've been talking more and more this year, is very important, whether that's age, whether that's race, whether that's, any other background. And I think that is one of the problems, is that you have important debates happening, but young people are not included in these debates. You have discussion over architecture education happening, and you have all these practices criticizing universities and education, saying, education should prepare students for the industry. But you don't have industry learning from education, and there is quite valuable lessons to learn from architecture universities as well. The research culture, the culture of the studio, they're all positive things to also feed back into the industry. So we kind of called ourselves as the bridge between education and industry, because we see it as a two-way street. It shouldn't, they shouldn't look the same, they shouldn't be the same, but they should inform each other. And I think that is what's missing. I think most students still don't really feel connected to RIBA or represented by RIBA, which is changing. There's also an open letter being written by Charlie Edmond, I think. Right now, I don't know if you heard of it. He's been compiling sort of survey from architectural assistants, talking about these issues that we're highlighting, which is, I think, is amazing. We are actually featuring an article by him very soon, so keep an eye out for that. But positive things are happening, but I think for that we all need to push, and make ourselves heard.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. It's as people speak up, things are not going to change. And I think that it's really important to be vocal and do it in the right way and to kind of bring presence on the issue. Well done. I'm really curious to see Charlie's little thing. I'm definitely going to keep my eye out for this open letter. Is that going to be, that's going to be on the website? Is it? That's going to be quite interesting.
Yeah, you can check his Instagram. He's been mostly kind of doing it through Instagram. And I think they're planning on sending it next week. And, there was, what's quite interesting is in their survey, they had a question where they said, do you feel supported by RIBA? And I think the outcome was an astonishing 97% no, which kind of goes to answer your question, I guess, of how people are feeling.
Yeah, well, I mean, being objective, sorry, RIBA, if you're listening, when I was a student, it's the truth. I also didn't feel very supported at the time. It's good that we got stuff going on now, but you're right. It needs to be a conscious effort. And I do think as well, kind of speaking a little bit about my experiences, that the jump when I was a part one and a part two more so when I was a part one from academia into industry, it felt like being thrown out of the nest. You know, it was a bit like, you know, when you see the nature shows and you've got David Attenborough and there's certain birds, which there was one particular bird, right? You have to bear with me with a second.
You gave this a lot of thought, didn't you?
No, it just comes to me now, but there's there's one bird and they've got this nest and they're underneath a waterfall and the children, they have to the children birds, they have to just jump out of this nest, yeah?
Oh, no.
And they either learn to fly or they tumble to their death. Sorry, It sounds a bit grim. But what I mean is that I felt like I was that bird being thrown out and it's like, go on, you got to get a job now.
You obviously flew, so...
Barely, and I guess what is the feeling of when most people get there, no one crashes in this analogy on the rocks and dies. Yay, okay. But what I do think though is that a lot of people tumble on the way, and there's something about the analogy when you're mid-flight. I remember the feeling of just being like, I don't know how to get a job. I'm just trying, and that's a little bit why I try to use this time to shed a light on. If you were a part one or a part two, how I would go about getting a job based upon my experience now and how I felt as a student. And that really was the origin of our article in the Evolve, wasn't it? It was my personal experience. And I quite, when you read back, it's so funny because I can hear myself talk in the text. And I'm like, oh God,
what's great is that you were being open and honest about it. And, you know, that is the frustrating thing about the whole process is that people are not open. You know, they might say, oh, we really like you and be really positive, and then they just stop replying to your emails. And when you are out of university, looking for a job, not knowing what you're doing wrong, you really, I understand that, you know, for them, they don't have time, they don't have most architecture practices, they don't have enough resources. But still, you know, just write back and say, you could do this better. Maybe just give feedback. And that feedback is the best thing you can give to someone rather than just ghosting a young graduate, which is very disheartening.
Yeah, you've hit upon a really good point, and it's a passion point for me. I mean, I kind of feel like I've been beating the drum on this for a few months, but as long as if it helps people out, it's a really big deal. And what you kind of highlighted there, you talked about how important feedback is, and you can still get it, but what we've got to do, and I guess the point of the article was saying you've got to be like your own recruitment consultant, or you've got to basically fight for yourself, as in people are going to be busy, like you quite rightly just pointed out, but we got to have the strength and the courage to call the companies up, because I guarantee if you call them, you can probably get that feedback, because when you get someone on the phone and you get that human interaction, they'll probably bring up your CV and get you that feedback. But the whole idea of doing that feels very unnatural. I never done it before. Now I say it so easily. And I know, guys, anyone listening, it's going to be like, oh, the idea of ringing up for feedback is just overwhelming. No one likes to be on the phone. It's not exactly what we're training for. But it's stuff like that will get you ahead. And I tell you the other one that I find interesting is when I've seen so many of these things online and I've even seen one or two there's someone that I know and I respect. He's a really good architectural director. He talked about when you are looking for a job, you need to get your CV and portfolio and tailor it to every company. And ideally, even in coronavirus, you put on your mask, putting on the mask down the road, getting the bell going. You put on the mask and then you go and you hand deliver this portfolio and CV, which cost you God knows how much because you've printed it. And I kind of feel like that's okay for the one or two practices you love, but we've got to kind of come out of rose-tinted glasses world and wake up. Okay, that was a really good bell. That was a...
that was
wake
on
up,
point.
Yeah, wake up, because I know that, I know from an employer's perspective that they want to feel like this employee has handwritten something they really want to work with them. But I'm saying from the architectural students' perspective is that we have to be really commercial about this, because you have to look out for yourself. And the reality is, in situations like this, you've got to use probability. And what I'm talking about, and that's the bit that I enjoyed talking about in our article, was that my view is that you should send 1,000 to 2,000 CVs at the moment. I mean, there's a list I'm working on at the moment, and I reckon there's about 4,000 architectural practices in the UK. Okay. So if you think there's 4,000 architectural practices, RIBA architectural practices in the UK, and there's a few places which aren't RIBA chartered, because you don't need to necessarily to practice architecture. You can be some multidisciplinary companies, they're not RIBA certified, but so we got 4,000 here. So sorry, mini rant sending soon. But basically, if you send 20 applications out of 4,000, you've immediately discounted 3,980 practices. Yeah. And you've got to use things, and you've got to look at it in an unconventional way. And the problem is with the advice I'm giving is that it doesn't have the rose-tinted romantic notion of architecture. Where it's like, oh, I studied for 3 years and I did the beautiful portfolio for this company and I sent them a book and it had a ribbon and a CV, and it's just like, it's not necessarily always the real world. And so for anyone listening, I don't want them to think that because they've sent a CV to 100 practices, okay, and you never heard of them before, doesn't mean it's actually, in my opinion, it's the right way, because my approach of doing this, I joined up at EPR Architects, which we talk about in the article, and which is a great company. I never heard of them at the time. I didn't tell them that, but I went through, and then the email came in and I was like, okay, all right. Oh, EPR are interested. Who's EPR? And I looked, I was like, hot damn, they're good, and you then you get excited, don't you? And then you zone in on it. But if I never wrote that list from A to Z, I wouldn't have got there. So anyways, I've gone off on a mini tangent, but it's because it's passionate. You're right.
Yeah, you're right. And they don't tell you that in university, like so many other things that they tell you, such as, don't use software, use hand drawing because it's more, romantic.
Well, that's
and then
a Cardiff thing, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's a Cardiff. I know Cardiff Uni. They love the drawing.
And they're like, oh, do you use Revit? And you're like, no, but I have nice drawings. And then,
do you know, it's catch-22 because, and I'm gonna help you because when I was a part one, right? I was the guy who scraped a 40 on the hand drawing class, but I was good on MicroStation. I had all this stuff. And I do think though, because my flatmate, Natalie Gal, who she lived with me for a few years. She's a wonderful architect at EPR Architects. That's where we met. And she has the most amazing hand drawings, right? Oh, they're amazing. And they're so good. But she can use CAD as well. And you're right. And so with your distinction, I do think it's amazing that Cardiff teach you hand drawing and the beauties of it.
I think it's amazing. That just don't give the impression that that's what people out there are looking. Job. That's what say you need to get these skills, but it's the same with the portfolio advice. They tell you to do it, cater it for the practice and stuff, and it's fine for the first 50, but then you still don't have a job. You run out of money to print the portfolios and the patience to write the cover letter, and then you kind of start being a bit more economical with your time. But the thing is, I also do understand the other side, because having gone through a part one experience where I worked in a practice where I didn't feel like my input was valued because I was an architectural assistant, or the office culture didn't fit me, I was much more aware of going into an office that was different to that in my part two. And, if that meant that I had to be a bit more selective, I was willing to do that. And I think there's a lot of young people out there that their expectation from what a job should be is a little bit different to the generation before us, which was more about security. Now, people are also seeking to have a bit more, meaning to their job, to feel valued, because you also spend so much time working, and most of it overtime and unpaid, unfortunately, still. So you don't want to feel like that's not valued. You don't want to, and there is also other dimensions to it where people from minority backgrounds also want to see representation of minority background people within the practice, which is something that a lot of young people say that they look at. They go onto the staff webpage and they look at who's there, who's working, who's made it into becoming a director. I think it does say a lot about the practice and the nature of practices. And at the end of the day, I feel like the way we eliminate some toxic work habits and office environments is by not supporting them, by not going into them, because they have this mentality that there's people lining up at their door waiting. So if one doesn't work, then the next one will come.
Do you know what? I feel like that's changing. I do feel like that you can't get away with it anymore. And I think a lot of the stuff we're talking about wasn't just prevalent in architecture. It's in across other industries. And I mean,
Definitely.
Hey, you've only got to look at like the film industry and Harvey Weinstein stuff. I mean, this is a very literal example, but it's almost laughable and tragic at the same time that this has been going on for so long in certain things. And I do feel that in architecture, I mean, one of the most prevalent things that's still happening is the issue of working long hours. And it's a myriad of factors. And the reality is it causes so much problems in these businesses. It's why I'm brought in as a recruitment consultant half the time, because someone leaves and it's because they've been burnt out of the long hours, which ironically is then more expensive than treating the person well. Because if I'm hiring someone, if you're looking for, say, your practice in the future, if you're briefing me because you need someone urgently, it's a few £1,000s, when I find someone, because that's how the introductions work, which sounds like a lot in theory if I was just here on my iPhone and I get one CV and sent across, but it's more like a lawyer. It's billable hours. And what you'll find is that a few £1,000 introduction is quite quick. It's if you divide that per hour that I work, it soon racks up. And so let's go back again a little bit. You touched upon the long hours and these kind of companies. And one of the things that came into my head when you were talking about it is, it's almost good in one way that I do encourage people, even if the first architectural practice you go to isn't perfect, it's a really good benchmark for you as an individual to then make your decisions in the future. Because I agree. I remember I enjoyed my time at EPR Architects. I had good experience. I was an intern for Swansea Council and they were really good to me, but it was a totally different world working for the government and the council than a private commercial architecture practice. And I'll tell you what, there was one company that he is still practicing, so I'm not going to say his name. And while I worked at EPR Architects, there was a competition at the time with this company. And what it was is that this practice was the design architect when EPR was the delivery architect. And this individual had been someone that is a very good designer. Right, he's very, very good designer. And so his architectural practice, he had his style. So he used to work many years at a famous architectural practice and very, very good design. But there was in the culture that had imprinted on him. And now he set up his architectural practice. I joined there for a week and I didn't know everything. I was trying out. They were trying on a deadline and he was a little bit impatient with me. And I'd get something wrong and he'd be like, no, it's not that, it's this. And I remember like in my head sitting in front of a computer at the mouse, just dreading getting it wrong. I'd be like, oh, can't swear here, but I'd be like, oh God, I don't know what, no, I'm going to do something wrong. And then I remember it was also my birthday at the time. And he was wanting me to work the weekend. And I'm happy to work. I used to be happy to work the weekend sometimes, but the amount of hours that went in. Anyways, the point is with this, I didn't enjoy that experience at all. EPR Architects were the opposite. I did very good hours. They were very supportive towards me. We had like one weekend in the whole time I was there and it was completely optional. It wasn't forced. And actually it was something that was a bit out of EPR's control. It was the kind of the client changing things at the last minute. And so I didn't mind doing that. But the difference is because EPR Architects treated me respectfully, then I was happy to give them the extra time. Whereas this other architectural practice where I was for a short period of time, it just felt like being a slave to the grind up against this competition. And I really didn't enjoy that as well. So I totally know how, when you're on about this kind of thing of working long hours or feeling a bit unappreciated, or I felt at the time, the perception was that I should have been privileged to be as part of the competition. Whereas,
that's the thing, isn't it? They treat it as if they're doing you a favor.
Yeah, well, in this practice they did, but not, I mean, we have to be objective on this. What I find funny is that once you kind of go out of this competition, like almost Devil Wears Prada world, because there are a few architectural practices where, I mean, the design is so killer that if you want to be involved, you almost have to, there's a price to pay. Like, and it's good to do it when you're almost younger so that because it's not sustainable when you're older. And look, if you want to be part of the thrill ride and you want to go for it, great. But just know what you're signing up to. There's so many other architectural practices which you can work 9 to 5. They're not as famous, but you can do really good quality design. You can make a big difference. And that's the thing with anyone in the job search now. And you touched upon it earlier where you went somewhere, you didn't feel as valued. And then actually it reinforces your choices in the future. And what I was kind of agreeing with in your sentiment there is that that's why I have a respect for EPR architects, and I quite like that commercial architectural practice with good design where you work, 9 to 5:30. You might work there a bit late till 6. But for me, I wasn't interested in that culture that I experienced of working till 11:30 every night and the weekends.
I think the other thing with those long hours that many fails to see. So I was one of the panelists for this talk called Expectation Meets Reality. And it was about sort of this education versus industry. And one of the panelists was Jared Evenden from Foster & Partners. And he was saying how for him, hours put in doesn't matter when he's, passionate about it and its design and all that. And, to an extent, that's kind of what you are saying. But one of the things that ends up doing is that you automatically exclude some people from the career because they might not be able to put in those extra hours, and it doesn't show less of a passion or less of a willingness to do, the design, but they might have someone at home to look after too. They might have kids to pick up from school. And, due to the way the society is still and the support there is, it usually ends up being the woman that needs to do that, whether or not she, she's a career woman and all that. A man is rarely ever stopped due to having a kid. You never, you go to talks. I've went to this talk, sort of like with Farshid Mousavi, and the interviewer, who was also a woman, she was asking, how do you juggle being a mum and an architect? And the thing is, you never hear that being asked to, Sir Norman Foster or like any other sort of male architect. So why is it seen as something still like woman's responsibility and an extra job? And she was put on the spot and she kind of got a little red, and she was saying, I probably don't do a good job of balancing those two. And she, you could see that she felt the responsibility of this so coming back to my point, I think most practices miss the point that is not just about a choice. Sometimes, and most of the times when you have that is one of the reasons why you don't have equal representation and diversity within your practice. But I guess I was lucky that was not the problem I had in my Part 1 experience, but it was more sort of the perception of what an architectural assistant could bring. To give you an example, I would say something about sort of land law, because I was interested in it, believe it or not. And, I read about it a little, and an architect would get angry that I spoke, and I said something that contradicted to what they said. And they would, I had this experience where he got up and he said, "Oh, remind me when you got your part 3 again." And then he just stormed out of the room, and everyone was looking at me, and, everyone was kind of looking at me thinking, why are you speaking? You shouldn't be speaking. You're a part 1. That's not what you're here to do. What you're here to do. So it's this sort of things that we need to change, I guess. At the end of the day, you need to make everyone feel respected and welcome within the practice.
Yeah, I think that by and large, actually, a lot of places are getting better. You're always going to get, unfortunately, in life, such as with companies, we're all people, right? And so you have the companies like drive and agenda, but you also have people's subliminal biases that they bring from their personal life. What I mean is sometimes I've had the experience of you're on one project and you can have one team leader and it can be this way, and then you go to another team.
Definitely.
and it's completely different. And so unfortunately, it's really hard to kind of get this like benchmark everywhere. I mean, a really good example is I actually quite like Heatherwick's attitude of that when Thomas Heatherwick is doing, and I've recruited for them. They are quite good at this stuff, actually, that his view is that anyone can participate to the idea as long as they can articulate what they're talking about and it's a sensible discussion. He will take an idea from a part 1, if the idea has value. And in that sense, fantastic. But then as well, because Heatherwick, the stuff they do, I mean, the projects are amazing, but that does take a lot of time. And I do think that with places like that, it is one of these things of you are doing revolutionary architecture. I imagine, though, it's quite difficult sometimes to finish at 5:30 with certain of these projects. I do think, though, what you touched upon earlier, which is interesting, is women in architecture. And I think that's a big reason you touched upon for a while, where there was a massive, do you remember even a year or two ago? I think it was like 2 or 3 years ago. There was a big deal in the AJ and BD, and quite rightly, because you had a certain architectural practices where there was a massive disparity between, what a male architect would earn and a female architect, almost in a similar position or the same position. And the female architect was getting paid less, which is actually wrong, in my opinion. And that's why it's good to see that salaries are getting even. But it does come from what you're on about, actually, because unfortunately, you're right. I can see that, a really enthusiastic architect is female, and, you decide in life for whatever reason you're going to have a child. It's fantastic. It's something to be celebrated. But you're right. It almost kind of in a mad way, then it puts a little bit of the brake on the person's career. And that has a massive knock-on effect for salaries. And, and then as well, it's really hard sometimes for a woman in architecture to return to architectural practice because she hasn't worked for a while. And I do think employers are getting much better. And I have seen some examples of architectural practices who have schemes to return women, professional women who are awesome, kick-ass architects back to work. I think Bespoke Careers did one as well. And I think it's really, really important. But it's like the magazine. Oh, I'm going to say the word. I was going to say we all need to get involved. But
because, you need people to talk about these issues for them to be tackled. And for that, you also need people in decision-making points, that decision-making statuses that, are women and think about these things.
Yeah, I think it's so spot on. I think actually this maybe on a bit of good news as well. Let's put a bit of a highlight. I tell you companies that are really good at this and should be inspirational for any employers out there. So HTA, I work with them. They are really good employers. And I've also worked with John Thompson Partners, JTP. They've won like Employee of the Year. They look after people. And so I think it's like that actually, is when people do really well, it should be really celebrated. And that's the good thing. We need to, I think, and this is what's good about the magazine, and because you can highlight this stuff as well. And I think that one of the ways we go forward is almost, and one of the ways which businesses will respond is because we can always talk about disparities and we should do better. But what's really interesting is when we look at companies which do it right and the benefits and gains they get. Because if we can focus and shine a light on that, then you'll find all these other architectural practices will follow suit. So I'll give you a really good one, right? So I absolutely have the worst attention span ever. Okay. And so I'm involved in the Architects Benevolent Society. I believe it was the Architects Benevolent Society, but they invited this lady and she was inspirational. I think her name was, let me find the name, but she basically was the Stride Tagline, right? Which is kind of like a multidisciplinary company. Yep. And her role was head of people. And it was a role which didn't exist. Oh, I have to find. Yeah, it's so. But in this one, it was like head of happiness or something. And basically, so Stride Tagline, when she joined, and people were taking days off sick. There was long hours working. People were generally unhappy, and so
probably high turnover of people as well.
Yeah, and it caused big problems for the business because there were some underlying unhappinesses on Stride Tagline, and what it meant is that people were less productive. They worked longer hours. They were less productive, and people were having big sick days. Right? Makes sense. I can totally, if I've been working long in the grind for ages, I feel a bit sick today. Do you know what I mean? You're like, I'm feeling a bit sick it's a protest point because underlining you've given a lot. And basically this lady, she was so good in Stride Tagline and she wasn't from architecture. And this was a really important distinction. She just looked at the business as an interesting point. I think because she was doing studies in this area about human psychology and how to improve. And basically what they found out was that by removing overtime or the requirement to do it as a culture, people then give more time when they wanted to because it wasn't expected. So, say that I work for your team, you've been really good for me, and we were in a bit of a jam, right? I go, no problem. I'm staying because this one's important.
And that's what's highlighted this year as well. The efficiency and productivity of people have actually gone up. The statistics say during this year where people were working at home, which has been a cause of concern for many practices. But, and this sort of thing will actually, having these flexible, work practices, allowing people to work a little bit from home, a little bit from, office will also mean that I think we would see more women in architecture and not having to necessarily take time off work, like I said. I mean, ideally the long-term, goal shouldn't just be women staying at home looking after the kid and working, but the role being shared and the government supporting childcare more. But that's a greater discussion for probably outside of the scope of this podcast. Yeah,
well, I think we're kind of getting nitty gritty. We'll have to come and return and do a few more of these as well. Yeah. I'll find out. So here we go. I think it was. Here we go. It might have been. So that's why I was typing away while we were talking. So Stride Tagline, they were the first company, and I think it was Nicola Rich. I'm pretty sure it was. And so she was HR advisor and coach. And So in 2011, she was trained as a counselor and then later as an emotional intelligence coach. And then she joined. And in 2014, she implemented a workplace well-being charter. Right.
Wow, nice.
And she had to go and it was brilliant. It was brilliant listening because she had to go into this meeting with all the directors and be like, we're going to have a workplace well-being charter. No one's going to work long hours. And can you imagine this board was just like, are you kidding me? We got projects going out the door. What are you on? And actually, she won them over because Stride Tagline, good company. So, and she introduced all this stuff in. And then when they got this well-being thing, they looked after people. People were being paid well. People were given treats. I think they did introduce stuff like, and you have to forgive me, Nicola, if you're listening. This is complimentary. I can't remember the exact details, but it was a little bit more like the early Google culture before Google now getting a bit more evil like Facebook. But there was a bit more that early thing of like work 80% and then you have like a little bit of time to develop stuff. And basically all these stuff that, Nicola introduced, people were getting more productive. They were taking less sick days. They were having higher outputs. They were happier. They stayed longer. No one was leaving, right? And so then what actually happens is at first the idea of, working these long hours, it almost seems like you have to do it to get the projects. So it can be a bit intimidating. There's a lot of factors going on. But what was interesting is that through introducing this well-being, then Triathlon saved a lot of money. They were more efficient as a business. And I think that the more value we place in ourselves as architects or architecture assistants, or the more people that I speak to about this stuff about, we have to stick strong with our fees. We have to look out for each other. I think we have to help each other out. We have to fight for issues that you highlight about, pay disparity between men architects and women architects. It's crazy when you think about it. Half the architects I know who are amazing are female architects. I mean, and you don't want to push people out of business. And we need to as well next year, because it's already difficult for architects who are not from the EU. Christ. And now it will be difficult for architects within the EU to work in the UK. I think we have to kind of make an extra effort. And RIBA have made a stance that they want to support it, but it comes down to us all at the moment to kind of remember what architecture in London is amazing. And there is a reason we all study it, because there's something awesome about it that, you can't quite put your finger on, but there is something still so good with architecture. And that's why we do not have the salaries of lawyers and all this stuff. And we do work a lot of extra hours at certain times, and we do enjoy it because there's something there. But what it is we can't let everything else, we can't let the passion being taken for granted. And that's why we've got to make sure, like you said, you've got to constantly be vocal about this. Community is key. People being involved with him, and people being on the architectural social. And it's encouraging RIBA when they do something really good to get involved and to keep going. And it's kind of that attitude of, you can't just complain about things. It's like you turn that moan that you said in Cardiff into a magazine where you can encourage and debate and better things. And it's about realizing that none of us are perfect. I mean, I've been a manager and it's a lot difficult, and it's easy to say, I'm going to do X, Y, Z. But when you're in the driving seat and you've got a project, it's difficult, but it's about learning and improving and discussing and not dwelling on the past so much. But it's like, sure, we have a chance now to improve
Definitely.
We've got a chance to keep supporting others. Hopefully RIBA's Future Architects will become serious. We have your magazine, which is going to highlight that cool survey.
I think, it's amazing because you have a lot of people, that's what's amazing with architecture, is that you have people that are interested in many things across the board, bringing experiences, bringing knowledge. And like you said, that's one of the great things about not just London, but UK architecture and architects, is that they come from all over the world. And with that, they bring a wealth of knowledge, wealth of references, wealth of, things that you yourself wouldn't think about. And I think that's the thing where no matter their age, no matter what, everyone brings something to the table. So the more we hear from everyone, the better as designers we are. And at the end of the day, for us to design spaces, we need to be inspired. We need to be happy. You design happy spaces when you're happy. Otherwise, life is not as colorful.
Well, this is it. And also, I mean, what I would say is I respect personally when things change, right? And to take accountability of a certain situation and improve it is amazing. So it's about an architectural practice. If you're a team leader, managing people's time efficiently so that they work less hours, fantastic. It's about embracing things and making a change. And I think that companies like HTA and John Thompson Partners, where it's so important, employee well-being and constantly pushing ahead, that should be celebrated. But architectural practices which aren't doing it so far, it's not like, I would just encourage everyone there to start embracing and kind of making these changes, and also this transpires, this attitude, I think, trickles down from everything. It's for architectural students right now. If you're a little bit upset with the current situation or you're feeling a bit lost, you do have to, I'm going to say the pun again, get involved. You do
get involved, people.
Yeah, get involved. But actually, there's loads of massive benefits to it. It's like getting involved, you're being proactive, you're doing something, you're thinking, you're adding something, you're putting your creative juices out there. Whether you're doing a big piece of artwork and then selling it, as long as you're doing something positive, I think that's really helpful. There's so many groups to get involved with as well, and charities. So the Architects Benevolent Society I'm involved with, and you've also got Article 25. I guess you can do a piece of drawing and sell it for charity. There's so much stuff that's handy there, because then we can use your Cardiff skills, can't we? The hand drawing. It won't get you a job. You need Revit to get a job right now, let me tell you. But
you do. I learned it the hard way, don't worry.
Yeah, you learned it the hard way. But I guess the point that I kind of want to drill in is what's really impressive about involved, or Sana's to scale. There's a few other examples out there. I love that when someone experiences a situation that maybe could be bettered, you've set these things up to discuss it, and it's really, really important. And that's the bit of, I joked earlier that in Cardiff it was set up because you had a little whinge about something, but actually the whole point about involved is not negative. It's not like, to me, like an example of bad journalism is The Sun.
Just complaining.
Versus
no, that's not allowed. We have editors, and we always check an idea and an article that's submitted to us. And if someone says, these are the problems, we always give feedback. Okay, what's your solution? We need to really think deeper. If we see a problem, we should also think, okay, what's the alternative? What can be bettered? Because by putting that out there is when we actually get somewhere. So you're absolutely right. We need to go beyond the negative thinking, and we need to work at it. But first of all, we also need to raise these things. And a lot of people, feel encouraged when other people start speaking.
Yeah, and I think to go back, I think it's celebrating that when companies or architects or anyone does something right, and then there's a reward. That's the way we're going to lead people, and I think that's why I was I quite enjoyed. And I know I stressed the point home about Troy Treglan, but I was so impressed when I watched it, because what it is stuff like that leads by example. Getting involved with involved. I said it again. Leads by example. We've got to keep being active and doing stuff and learning and getting, we've got to be pushing forward. We've got to lead by example. We all have to. And that's where to kind of come full circle on what we talked about. That's how you change certain things, like such in the RIBA. That's why Future Architects is around. It's because clearly there's seen a need there, and the disparity of there hasn't been really much for students, and they're making an effort. And I think the more that evolved and Sana and Scale and a few others, as long as we keep beating the drum, things will change. So what I was going to say now is, I think this has been a good little chat. I'm conscious that I don't want to rant past 2 hours because everyone's going to switch off, but we've had a really good hour chat here. I feel like me and you could have a chat for ages. So what I was going to say is, should you give me the honor, perhaps what we can do is maybe when there's key articles or key things involved that we want to talk about, maybe we can talk about Chris's open letter.
Perfect.
Or maybe
That'd be amazing.
Yeah, because I think that'll be, and what I'll do is I'll hide my ranting bell, and I'll hide everything, and I won't go off on one about things I'm passionate about. When you're talking about looking after employees, that's something that's definitely close to home. But I think that could be a really great way that we can continue the conversation. And maybe, do you know what, as well? We can always host an event, and I can take a back burner, and we can get Chris talking and you, and I'll sit back and I'll hide the bells. and we can have a nice focused discussion.
I think that would be amazing. Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I'm up for a conversation anytime, as you can tell.
Well, we got nothing to do but chat in this new world. It feels like sometimes, isn't it? But I'm just trying to put my bell down without it making too much noise.
That's fine.
Look, great. So for anyone that's not familiar with Involved, and we need to check them out straight away, where can they find you at the moment?
So you can go to involvedmag.com to find our online platform where we have our articles. You can get in touch with us through that by emailing us, or there's a form to fill if you have any idea or an article. And it's not necessarily just an article, and it doesn't have to be ranting and always about social things, but you can it might be an interesting project or interview or any drawing or anything you want. Write to us, and we will get back to you. Our editorial team are lovely, and they will give you references and feedback if you'd like. And, we kind of collaborate in bringing about these articles. So don't get scared if you've never written an article. That's our online platform, but we are also launching an open call for our next annual issue, which is going to be on the theme of power. Which I love. I love the new theme, and I hope it will inspire a lot of people. So in January, we're releasing an open call for people to submit work for this as well. And like I said, articles, visual content, anything. And right now, we are doing an open call for the cover image. So this will be the first time we're doing an open call for the cover image. And I think power is such a great theme for this. So check us out. We're on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, anywhere and everywhere. Well, probably not on TikTok. I don't know. That's a new generation thing that I haven't. On TikTok. I haven't jumped into that, But in the other ones, you can find us as Involved Magazine. So give us a shout.
Super cool. Get involved.
Stay
Absolutely.
Involved.
And on the Architectural Social, I think we've got a post there, but when we post this up, I will put all the links in there as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Enjoy the rest of your hotel with a nice view.
You. I can't wait to get out.
Brilliant.
Well.
And I'll try and get this up around Christmas Day.
Ooh.
Maybe. Yeah.
Maybe.
Christmassy. I'll try.
I love that maybe at the end.
With me, everything's ish, as in like I try to live stream every Wednesday-ish because, real life creeps in.
But
we will get there before then. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Enjoy
Take
your
care.
food. Bye-bye. Thank you.